Persistent prayer is a way of deepening our relationship with God. Little David was a deaf and dumb boy. He lived in a home near a school run by the same management. Once the morning assembly for prayer was over and a teacher was distributing chalks to his students. David was watching the teacher distributing the chalks and he wanted to get one for himself. He just walked up boldly and gazed at the teacher with an expression full of expectations. There was a longing and determination in his look. The teacher understood what the boy was communicating with his look. And his look said, "I am not leaving until I receive one." So the teacher took a small piece of chalk and gave it to him and patted on his back. But the little boy turned his face and refused to take it. The teacher was amused. She asked him gently with a smile what he really wanted. But he continued to stare at the chalk box and the teacher. He wanted not a broken chalk piece, but a full, tall one. Though he could not talk, that look said it all. Little David was not ready to compromise. The little fellow managed to capture the heart of the teacher, and he received an unbroken, complete chalk piece. Having received what he wanted, he looked at her with love. The message was clear, "Thank you," and he went away satisfied. He was consistent, determined, focused in asking until he received what he wanted. The teacher responded well with the persistent demand of the deaf child because she could understand his need, she could understand his language, and there was a relationship that existed between the child and the teacher. So, it was the relationship that enabled the child to ask persistently, and it was the same relationship that moved the heart of the teacher to grant him his need. It is the same with prayer. Prayer is an expression of our relationship with God. That is why Jesus tells us to be persistent in prayer. Our persistence is our desire to get our needs met. But for God, our persistence is a way of deepening our relationship with God. Our goal in praying may be to get what we want. God's goal is to get us to know Him better, to trust Him more, to obey Him more completely, to love Him more deeply. Prayer is not about what we want and how to get God to give it to us. Prayer is about knowing the God who already knows our needs, discovering His will, and aligning ourselves with that. Prayer is about relying on Him 24/7. One can be persistent only with the one he loves. Thus, prayer can change circumstances and prayer can change us. In the Gospel according to St. Luke chapter 18, verses 1 to 18, we have the parable of the unjust judge. The two main characters are the unjust judge and the widow who was wronged. The widow wanted justice and the judge was not interested in helping her. He was unconcerned about the needs of others. It is a realistic depiction of the society where people with power and money do wrong to the helpless people, like a widow looking for justice. But because of her persistence, he is moved to action. Jesus tells this parable to show that we should always pray and not give up. Some people speak about the acronym PUSH, which stands for Pray Until Something Happens. The Lord is telling us to pray and never to give up. But sometimes praying at all times can become very hard when you are going through a hard time. In the book of Exodus chapter 17 verse 8 onwards, we read, Amalek came and waged war against Israel. Moses stood up with the staff of God in hand in prayer. Joshua engaged himself in battle. As long as Moses kept his hands raised up, Israel had the better off in the fight. Moses had to persist in keeping his hands raised up in prayer for the Israelites to be victorious. Aaron and Hur supported his hands. They placed a rock in place for Moses to sit down when he was tired of human weakness. Thus, in spite of his weaknesses, persistence was the key to his success. St. Paul exhorts Timothy in his second letter, chapter 4, verse 2, proclaim the word, remain persistent, whether it is convenient or inconvenient, convince, reprimand, encourage through patience and teaching. The apostle is emphasizing the need to be persistent in prayer and in the proclamation of God's word. The Lord invites us today to pray without ceasing, being persistent with the hope that God is love. He knows our needs and we need to be in constant contact with Him in prayer. That is the purpose of prayer, to establish a loving relationship with God. Let us proclaim with the psalmist, our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth.